Om is a mantra that we probably heard many, many times. It's the most common mantra in Hinduism. It's very sacred. And it is a symbol of the divine itself, of Brahman, of the Absolute. But it's also a practice. Like you can practice meditation or repetition of mantra on Om. And it's also a symbol. As we said, it symbolizes the divine. But the Upanishads, when we read the Upanishads, when they talk about Om, and they talk, almost every Upanishad talk about Om, they say that Om is itself Brahman. So in a way, you have something which is a symbol, a practice, and the thing that it symbolizes of at the same time. Prabhuji writes in the commentary of the Ishavasya Upanishad, in the very beginning, that Om is something so desired that human beings are willing to do almost everything, to sacrifices to attain it. Now, to try to understand this about this very unique mantra, we need to go into the Shanti, the commentary to the invocation in the Ishavasya Upanishad, which is at the very beginning. Last time we gave like an overview of the Ishavasya Upanishads, and now we're actually getting into the actual commentary, into the meat. And the first thing that starts the Ishavasya Upanishad is the invocation or the Shanti mantra of the Ishavasya Upanishad. It's a very, very famous mantra. The mantra in Sanskrit reads Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vishyate. This is the first invocation, and we will go in very deep into what all this means. But as you see, it starts with Om Purnam, Om. We find Om here. And that's why Prabhuji writes about it. So Om is very, very unique, very mysterious mantra. And it appears not only in Hinduism, but you can find it in Buddhism also. We have mantras like Om Mane Padme Buddha Hom. You see the Om there. In Jainism also. Even in the Jewish Kabbalah, there is something that is called the 72 names of God, and Om is one of them. I want to clarify that when I talk about Om, I'm not going to get into it from like the esoterical, mystical point of view of or the whole issue of mantras and the sounds and all that. That is a whole subject by itself. It's a whole science by itself. Also, I'm not going to talk about so much from the devotional point of view, like the use of mantras in devotion, which is very, very big, as you can imagine. If you want to know about these things, you can read, for example, in Kundalini Yoga of Prabhuji, in Kundalini Yoga, you can find about information about the mantras almost in relation to practice and chakras and all that aspect. And you can read all about the devotional aspect of mantra yoga as kirtan in the book of Bhakti Yoga. And also in Tantra Yoga, you have a chapter about Mantra Marga, which is the path that deals with mantras. So I bring this up because these are very different approaches to what we're going to discuss today. This invocation, the Shanti mantra of the Ishavasya Upanishad, Om Purnam Adam Purnam Idam, is so important that and Prabhuji quotes that. That's actually the first thing he writes in the book about what Mahatma Gandhi said about it. That if you would take all the scriptures of Hinduism and burn them to ashes, and only this invocation will remain, you can revive the whole Hinduism just from this. Just to give an idea of how important it is. And also it made me think, can you say that about other religions? If you take all the scriptures of a certain religion and burn them, can you revive the religion after that? Om symbolizes the absolute, the omnipotent, omnipresent Brahman. and the source of all that is manifested. And then Prabhuji continues and he brings a few examples from the scriptures of how important Om is. One of them is from the Bhagavad Gita itself, where Krishna says that of all the sounds, I am Om. So Krishna, again, he equates himself to Om. Then we have the Upanishad is mentioned in almost every, the Om is mentioned in almost every Upanishad. It's mentioned in the Chandogya Upanishad, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. There's a whole story that appears in both Upanishads about how the Devas Devas being gods trying to fight against the demons. And to do that, they try to use the Udgita, and Udgita is another name for Om. They try to find someone that will chant it for them in order to vanquish the demons, and there's a whole story about that. So, Om is a very, very big subject in the Upanishads. The Taittiriya Upanishad says, the sacred sound Om is Brahman. All of this is the syllable Om. And here we see again this kind of equation of Om is Brahman, Om is the Absolute. And we need to understand how Om can be the practice and the symbol at the same time. And to really understand this, we're going to go a little bit into a few scriptures. O Satyakama, this very Brahman that is known as the inferior and the superior is but this Om. And Shankara writes in the commentary to this verse, Brahman is identical with Om, since Om is its symbol. As the Supreme Brahman cannot be directly indicated by words, therefore the mind cannot explore it. But to those who meditate on Om, which is comparable to images of Vishnu, that Brahman becomes favorable. Om is the nearest symbol of Brahman. So we see here, Shankara says, Om is the symbol of Brahman, the most close symbol to Brahman. To get a better idea, we need to see what Prabhuji writes about Om. Om consists of 3 Sanskrit letters, A, U, and M. Well, not A, U, and M, which combine to create the sound Om. So you would sometimes see that when they actually write Om, they don't write it O-M, they write A-U-M, because the way you pronounce it is actually, you start with A, go into U, and finally M. So you get like Aum, and that is the pronunciation of Om. And that's very, very important, because what is unique about this is that the sound start from A, then U, then M, is actually the whole range of all the tones that we can create with our mouth. Because if you say A, R starts at the base of the throat, the most, like, you cannot go deeper than that to start a sound. It's A, it's come from the throat. Then U is somewhere here in the mouth, and M is in the lips, and you have to close the lips, and that's the last sound you can make with your mouth. So basically, Om starts from the throat and does the whole process all the way to the end of your mouth, which is the lips. So all the sounds that you can pronounce in any language, really, maybe there's some languages that use other sounds, but in almost all the languages, especially at least Sanskrit, is somewhere in that range. Is somewhere from either starting from A to M, it's somewhere in between. Remember that fact, because now we're going to go into a few verses that Prabhuji mentioned, that he put in the commentary, that are taken from the Mandukya Upanishad. And the Mandukya Upanishad has a whole discussion about about Om and the self, and how they are related, and how actually Om is a symbol of the self. Now this is a little bit, to get into it, it's a little bit a big subject. We can't cover the whole thing in one lecture. I'm going to put the verses in, but I'm going to summarize them so we can quickly understand the idea. The first verses are a description, even though it says Om, you will see that it is a description of the self. What is the self? So the first verse says, this letter that is Om is all of this. We already saw that in the Taittiriya Upanishad and this. Its explanation is this: the past, the present, the future, all of this is nothing but Om. Moreover, that is beyond the 3 periods of time is also Om. So here, and again, remember this part because it will come back later. You have something which is divided into 3. Here is time, past, present, and future. And in addition to that, a 4th dimension which is beyond time. So we actually have 4 things. Now we get into talking about the self or Brahman. All this is surely Brahman. The self is Brahman. The self, such as it is possessed of 4 quarters. Now, this doesn't mean that you can cut the self into 4 slices like a pizza, and then you have a quarter of a pizza, and that's a quarter of a self. No. When they say quarters, they mean 4 aspects or 4 parts, but not parts, again, not as separate things, but as things that exist in the one thing. So we have these 4 quarters, and now they explain what these 4 quarters are. And again, I will go on this a little bit fast. The first is called Vaishvanava, and what's important to remember, it's that its sphere of action is the waking state. Okay? And then the second quarter is called Taijisa, and that sphere is the dream state. The sphere of activity is the dream state. So we had the waking state, and now we have the dream state. And then we have the third, that is called Prajna, and that is deep sleep. Meaning very deep sleep without any dream. There's experience of nothing. And then here we have the 4th quarter. And the 4th quarter is actually, if we read the description, is not conscious of the internal world, nor conscious of the external world, nor conscious of both the worlds, nor a mass of consciousness, nor consciousness, nor unconscious. It's unseen, beyond empirical dealings, beyond the grasps of the organs of speech. In short, this is something completely transcendental. That is the self, and that is to be known. The first 3 are easy to understand. We have the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. The 4th is not something that is... We basically cannot say anything about it. The Turiya, the 4th state. We cannot say anything about it because we can't describe it. It's not that it's not one of those, and it's not that it's not in one of those, or in all of them. Simply to put a description to that will be wrong. Because as we say, the Upanishad is saying it is not conscious and not unconscious. It's not this and not under this. So basically you cannot describe it in anything. But it is the self. And now we get to Om. This is here the Mandukya Upanishad starts to talk about Om. That very self, considered from the standpoint of the syllables, is Om. Considering from the standpoint of the letters, the quarters of the self are the letters of Om. A, U, and M. So now we can start seeing how this thing, there's a kind of a correlation between what we talked about, the self and its quarters, and the Om. Because what the Upanishad is saying is that the first letter A is related to Vaishvanara, the waking state. So the first state, the first quarter, equals to the letter A. Okay? And then the second letter, U, is related to Taijasa, which is the state of dream. And so on. And so the will be related to the state of a deep sleep. So we have A, U, and waking, dream, and deep sleep. And the fourth state, which, as we said, is not defined in any way, doesn't have a letter. It's undefined, so we cannot say anything about it. And the Upanishad is also saying why. And here is another interesting thing. Why is A related to the Vaishvanara, the waking state? Why is U related to the dream state? And the reason it's giving is very cryptic. Because what it's saying is, because the similarity. There is a similarity of that quarter of the self, that aspect of the self, of the waking state. There is a similarity to the first letter of Om. What is that similarity according to the Mundakya Upanishad? Pervasiveness. And also being the first. So we have A is the first in AUM, right? A is the first. And also the waking state is considered the first, because that's the first thing we see. And the same idea we have with U. U is, the similarity is because of excellence, superiority. Now, why exactly that it means, I don't know, but we see that the Upanishad is putting it, and as I said, this is an enigma, it's a cryptic thing. And then we have M, the last letter, and there is because of measuring. And because of absorption, because everything absorbs into When you say Om, the Om kind of trails away, everything absorbs into that. And again, and the Upanishad ends with saying the partless Om is Turiya, beyond all the conventional dealings. Okay, so this is, again, something that we cannot know exactly what it means. So, to summarize, we have the self, or Brahman, the absolute reality, here is not divided, but have like 4 aspects. 3 of them we can all relate to. 3 of them is something that we experience every day. Waking, which is, I hope, the state we're now. Sleep, with dreams, and deep sleep, where we don't dream and experience nothing. Those, everything we experience. The Turiya is something we can't really talk about, and it's something that we don't, maybe we think we don't experience. And then the correlation to that is in the mantra, the A, U, and which is waking, dream, and sleep. Actually, we went from a symbol that symbolizes the self, and we kind of cut it into smaller symbols. Now it's not just Om as a symbol, it's like the letters that make Om, which is A, U, Now they themselves are symbols of different aspects of the self. And the Upanishad is saying, and this is actually explained more in the Karika of Gaudapada. There's Gaudapada was a master that wrote a commentary to the Mandukya Upanishad. And there he says that when you understand that similarity, which I mentioned, that A is of perversiveness and being the first, and U is excellence or superiority and intermediateness, and M is measuring and absorption. When you understand that, which I can't claim that I do, but when you understand it, the whole idea becomes clear. And he says there's nothing to think about anymore. So where are we now? This all is very complex. Like we started by saying we have a symbol and we have what it symbolizes, and the Upanishads keep saying that it's the same thing. We try to understand it, and we went into the Mandukya Upanishad and it broke it down to other symbols, and now we have a symbol that is made of other symbols. So how we're about to understand? How can we understand all this? Seems like we just put ourselves in deeper mud. And for this, again, Prabhuji writes, it is possible to access the deeper meanings of the Om mantra beyond its linguistic aspects. For this purpose, it is essential to focus on it not only as a word, but as a sound. By pronouncing Om, we actually said everything that is possible to say. For this reason, Om is considered a name of God. So, like we said before, when we start with A, then go U and we have the range, the entire spectrum of all the sounds that we're making when we talk. So, in a way, if Prabhuji is saying, if you reduce that to just sounds, you realize that you actually can, inside Om, you have everything that you can say, or everything you can possibly say in the future. And words are not just words. Words are our thoughts also, and they are the way we describe things, describe our life. And if you think about everything that we can talk about, everything that we can describe, is in one of those states, in one of those aspects of the self that we mentioned before, the waking, the dream, or deep sleep. Everything that we can say, everything we can think, every possible conclusion that we can have is expressed in these words. And what Prabhuji is saying is that when you pronounce Om, you are saying all of what can be said, all that you can think about, everything. And then he says, for this reason, Om is considered the name of God. So, what this means is not that Om is some kind of another clever way of calling God or addressing God. Om includes everything. As we say, Om is a symbol of all the three states, but also the fourth, which is something that you cannot talk about. So Om includes everything that we can say, and everything that we can think about, and also everything else. Everything is in Om, and because of that, it is a name of God. But the deep meaning of that is that it's not an idea. Because if it was an idea, it would be only on those three parts that we can talk about. If God was an idea that we can understand, it would be something we can understand either in the waking state, or in the dream state, or in the deep, the sleep without dreams. All of these things are things that we can understand and we can talk about. So if God was something there, an idea that you can define in the knowledge that comes from one of those, it wouldn't be Om, because Om is more than that. Om contains much more than that. It contains those three aspects, but it also contains the fourth, which is something we cannot talk about because there's no way to describe it. So in that aspect, Om becomes a name of God. And we need to remember that when we have an idea, like we said before, of thinking that we know, we understand, and I have an idea, a symbol of the divine, and I possess it, we never have the entire picture. Because anything that we can think about and verbalize is still limited to things that we experience in our life, in that waking state or in the dream state or in the deep sleep state. But by putting this model of the self, by having 4 aspects, 4 quarters and not 3, that there's another one which you cannot think about, we need to understand that there's something beyond our understanding. And that it can be a name of God. That's what Prabhuji is saying here. Thank you very much. Jai Prabhuji.